Breaching is a synchronized, combined arms operation controlled by the maneuver commander and is one of the most difficult combat tasks a force can encounter. Due to the complexity of the mission, commanders must understand the capabilities and limitations of platforms across all warfighting functions in order to mass and sequence combat power against a decisive point. This video will illustrate viable TTPs for the conduct of the combined arms breach against a hypothetical enemy. However, commanders must develop their own unique courses of action based on their MET-TC analysis. In our scenario, a Denovian Motor Rifle Battalion, BMP equipped, is conducting an area defense of a linear obstacle from mutually supporting battle positions, with companies online, platoons online within a brigade-sized avenue of approach. A complex obstacle belt is forward of the enemy defenses. It consists of a protective minefield on the forward edge of a 4-meter wide, 2-meter deep tank ditch. Approximately 10 meters behind this ditch is a triple strand of concertina wire, marking the beginning of a 50-meter deep anti-tank minefield, bordered by another triple strand of concertina wire. Total depth of this obstacle group is 200 to 300 meters. This is a view of the obstacle as we approach from friendly positions. Note that well-prepared obstacles may also be difficult to identify as they appear to blend into the distance. The enemy's motor rifle platoons defend with 2 squads up, 1 squad back, in squad fighting positions connected by communications trenches. The enemy will employ RPGs and ATGMs such as the AT-14 Spriggan from these positions. Additionally, the platoon defenses include manpad systems such as the SA-18 Grouse. The platoon's BMPs occupy primary vehicle fighting positions able to orient 30mm cannon fire and ATGMs on the platoon's kill zones. The enemy battalion retains an attached tank platoon in reserve with a main planning priority to counterattack against penetrations. To defeat this formidable obstacle, an armored brigade combat team will conduct 2 simultaneous breaches with combined arms battalions, or CABs, with a 3rd cab in reserve to exploit success and defeat counterattacks. This video will focus on the breach and assault forces of one of the leading cabs. The Task Force mission. Task Force 269 Armor attacks no later than 10-0600 May to seize Objective Alexandria in order to pass 252 ID to Objective Kate. As discussed in ATTP 3-90.4, commanders must understand and incorporate the breaching tenets during course of action development. Following mission analysis, commanders task information collection assets to answer priority intelligence requirements, or PIR, about the obstacles and any possible bypasses. This OBS intel is essential for commanders. The brigade combat team will conduct 2 simultaneous breaches with combined arms battalions, or CABs, with a third cab in reserve to exploit success and defeat counterattacks. This video will focus on the breach and assault forces of one of the leading cabs. The Task Force mission. Task Force 269 Armor attacks no later than 10-0600 May to seize Objective Alexandria in order to pass 252 ID to Objective Kate. As discussed in ATTP 3-90.4, commanders must understand and incorporate the breaching tenets during course of action development. Following mission analysis, commanders task information collection assets to answer priority intelligence requirements, or PIR, about the obstacles and any possible bypasses. This OBS intel is essential for commanders to allocate assets into support, breach, and assault forces. Finally, commanders mass combat power against enemy weaknesses through the synchronization of assets within the breaching fundamentals. The breaching fundamentals, known as SOSRA, are the 5 basic steps of every breaching operation. These steps degrade the enemy's ability to apply combat power against the breach force and ultimately prevent the enemy's ability to influence the assault force. Commanders establish triggers and reporting requirements to correspond with each step to synchronize the operation, setting conditions prior to committing additional combat power. The concept of our battalion's operation is heavily enabled by assets at multiple echelons. Brigade and higher assets support the cabs by conducting strikes in the deep area to isolate the enemy from supporting fire. Fundamentals, known as SOSRA, are the 5 basic steps of every breaching operation. These steps degrade the enemy's ability to apply combat power against the breach force and ultimately prevent the enemy's ability to influence the assault force. Commanders establish triggers and reporting requirements to correspond with each step to synchronize the operation, setting conditions prior to committing additional combat power. The concept of our battalion's operation is heavily enabled by assets at multiple echelons. Brigade and higher assets support the cabs by conducting strikes in the deep area to isolate the enemy from supporting fire. The Cavalry Squadron, UAS, and other information collection assets further clarify the enemy situation, especially regarding obstacles and potential bypasses. Additionally, the Cavalry Squadron destroys enemy reconnaissance assets within its capability to delay enemy identification of the point of breach. In addition to other deep missions, indirect fires conduct suppression of enemy air defense, or SEAD, prior to aviation assets arriving on target to allow fixed-wing aviation to destroy high payoff targets. Attack helicopters provide precision anti-armor direct fire. The task force and subordinate company teams divide the operation into 4 phases. Movement from the line of departure. Actions at the probable line of deployment. The breach. And actions on the objective. The breach team is a tank-heavy team with attached engineer assets including ABVs, Wolverines, and sappers. The support team is another tank-heavy team as well as a BFV heavy team from the assault force supplementing the support force during the breach. The battalion HQ retains additional breach assets in reserve, including the M9 Ace, which can skim mines down to 12 inches if required. In Phase 1, the task force moves in wedge formation with the breach force in the lead and task force mortars and attached ADA assets in the rear. As the task force approaches the probable line of deployment, support forces come online. Phase 2 begins as the task force deploys and begins setting conditions for the breach. The task force is arrayed along a 500-meter front in order to mass combat power against 2 enemy platoons. This increases the vulnerability to enemy indirect fires. Higher headquarters bear the responsibility of establishing critical friendly zones and conducting aggressive counterfire to protect the breach force. Fires are also initiated to provide suppression of enemy ADA assets to set conditions for fixed and rotary wing aviation to target other high payoff targets in conjunction with the support force beginning direct fire engagement. Commanders should establish tangible standards of suppression, such as the destruction of a number of high payoff targets, as a trigger to fire smoke targets. Smoke targets are fired immediately in front of enemy positions to provide obscuration prior to the committal of the breach force. One noted issue in the Combined Arms breach is balance of protection provided by obscuration versus mission command. While obscuration reduces the commander's ability to command and control the breach, maximum obscuration is recommended. Protection of breaching assets is essential to maintain momentum, especially as the risk to key assets increases as they approach enemy positions. Loss of even a few breach assets drastically complicates the breach. Commanders and their units compensate through drills, rehearsals, visual signals, FM, and digital communications. Additionally, while this operation is depicted during daylight hours, limited visibility caused by weather and night further increase concealment for the breach force while complicating command and control. Phase 3 begins when the breach force is within 200 meters of the obstacle. The support force, augmented by indirect fires and fires from close combat attack aviation, provide continued, focused suppression against the enemy position. This is essential to prevent the enemy from massing additional combat power on the breach force once it is identified. The breach team will make 2 breaches, one per tank platoon, with the mech infantry platoon providing local security. The roller tanks move up and detect the edge of the minefield visually, or by detonating a mine. The tank fires smoke grenades and backs up 50 meters. This triggers the ABV to move forward to the lead tank and fire the Miklik. The Miklik detonation explosively breaches a lane 17 meters wide and 120 meters long. Note that the Miklik will not detonate many modern mines, necessitating a mechanical breach. The ABV then begins a mechanical breach of the lane by employing a full-width mine plow. The plow is lowered far enough from the minefield to ensure sufficient spoil is built to move buried mines. The depth of the blade setting is determined based on the METC analysis of the obstacle. The plow tank provides redundancy for the mechanical breach, but is less preferred due to the use of a track-width plow. Plows are the preferred method of mechanical breach as they physically move mines not detonated by the Miklik out of the lane. Also note that the vehicles must plow in a straight line and over level ground to ensure the required blade depth is maintained. The ABV is followed by the roller tank, which proofs the lane within the track widths. The ABV's marking system provides initial marking within the lane. Simultaneously, the sappers begin emplacing far lane markings that will funnel follow-on forces to the lane. The ABV and roller plow and proof the lane to the tank ditch and pull aside to allow the employment of gap crossing assets. The Wolverine moves forward and emplaces the bridge under the concealment of local obscuration. The breach force remains very vulnerable while stationary during the emplacement of the bridge, and continues local suppression from the tanks as they move across the lane. Note, however, that tanks equipped with plows or rollers must orient their gun tube 30 degrees from forward to prevent damage from a mine strike. After the gap crossing, the roller tank, if still operational, continues forward to identify the leading edge of the next minefield, either visually or by detonating the mine. The ABV again moves forward, fires its second Miklik, and begins plowing the lane. The roller tank, followed by his wingman, follows behind the ABV and improves the lane. Upon reaching the far side of the obstacle, the ABV pulls aside as the roller tank section pulls forward and establishes far side security at the point of penetration. This section is immediately joined by the platoon's other section, followed by the mechanized platoon. Securing the point of penetration triggers Phase 4, actions on the objective. The assault force, already moving to the point of breach, must follow rapidly behind the breach force in order to maintain tempo. The breach force maintains continued suppression on the objective as the assault force moves through the breach lane. As the assault force exits the lane, the breach force shifts and ultimately ceases fire as the assault force reaches graphic control measures based on the surface danger zones of the breach force. Indirect fires and direct fires from CCA also shift and cease based on the maneuver of the assault force. Once the breach force ceases fire, it bounds 500 meters beyond the objective to isolate it from enemy reinforcements and defeat counterattacks, and allow wider sectors of fire for the assault force. The tank platoon attached to the assault teams maintains continuous suppressive fire of enemy positions as the mechanized infantry platoons dismount on the objective using a standard drill. Bradley fighting vehicles maintain continuous suppression as the infantry bounds to the trench using individual movement techniques, employs hand grenades, enters, and clears the trench. Trench clearing is a manpower-intensive task requiring large quantities of ammunition and grenades. Bayonets should be fixed as hand-to-hand combat is likely. After the objective is cleared, the task force commander signals consolidate and reorganize. Sappers continue to improve lane markings and widen lanes to eventually support two-way traffic. The task force establishes hasty defensive positions to defeat counterattacks, and establishes passage and link-up points to pass follow-on forces. The synchronization of multiple assets required to achieve success makes the combined arms breach a very difficult operation. No one piece of equipment is capable of accomplishing the mission. Breach assets must complement each other. The scenario replicated here is closely based on an NTC exercise executed circa 1990. That exercise, conducted with a combination of force-on-force and live fire over a period of 3 weeks, was able to conduct the breach itself in approximately 20 minutes. At that time, 20 separate actions by 4 separate pieces of breaching equipment were required in each lane. The incorporation of the ABV has helped simplify the operation. Breaching operations cannot be standardized at any level, from the task force to the lane itself. They must be planned in detail based on the METTC conditions. Detailed intelligence is absolutely essential for success in such operations, right down to types of mines and their depth, and the array of the enemy fighting positions. Planning such operations requires command involvement. Planning must start from the decisive point and plan backward in detail through breaching and then back to the LD in movement. The critical event of the breach must be planned in detail. Additionally, higher echelons of command must limit the scope of responsibility for the breach forces. In this scenario, the task force focused on a 500-meter front to mass all its combat power against 2 enemy platoons, as well as suppress the neighboring platoons. The task force also penetrated only 700 meters deep. The importance of effective air-ground operations and effective counterfire cannot be overstressed. As in this scenario, a task force focused on a 500-meter front faces greatly increased risk from enemy air and indirect fire assets, especially if the enemy is able to identify the point of breach and the point of penetration. Higher echelons of command must provide the support required to allow their breach forces the ability to mass on their objectives. Finally, rehearsals are essential to reduce friction in such a complex operation at every level of command. Units should conduct full dress rehearsals against constructed replicas of the obstacle if time, resources, and enemy situation permit. Things will go wrong in an operation this complex, and good rehearsals will increase adaptability when they occur.